righty, it is 7:05, and I believe this is a good as time as any to get started. So with that being said, as more people start to come in, I have asked my good friend Matt Kaufman to make sure that he is reminding people to remember to turn off your cameras, turn off your mics, so that we are not distracted by other audio and other visuals. But we want to welcome you all here tonight to partake in this discussion about racism and how it's played out in our society and also on our campus and also in the BG community. We have several panelists here tonight, some very bright, wonderful individuals to share their experiences and also to give their critiques of different systems and answer different questions. We received a few questions throughout the week and we're very grateful. So we'll do our best to get through them. Just to go a little bit over the flow, I'll do some introductions and then I've asked Dr. Thomas Edge to give us some definitions to kind of work from. And then we'll go through some questions that were sent and also some other questions that we've thought up. Afterwards, we'll leave time for some questions from the audience. Feel free to raise your hand or present questions in the comments. Matt's gonna do his best to kind of organize those for me so that I can see those and I will call on them in order as they come in. If you have questions as they come up or comments, feel free to use the chat. We are welcoming you to do that. We'll do our best, and I will do my best once again to make sure that I'm looking and calling on questions as they come in or reserving them for the end. Alrighty, so with that being said, I will go along with introductions. I'll introduce myself first. My name is Toni Gordon. I use she, her, hers pronouns. And I am one of the assistant directors in the Office of Multicultural Affairs at Bowling Green State University. My focus is on diversity, education, and retention initiatives. I've been doing this work for roughly 10 years, maybe a little more if you include my undergrad years. Do not date me. That does not mean I'm old or seasoned. That just means that I have a little experience. That is all. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it to our panelists and I will call on them to introduce themselves. But panelists, please, if you can, name, organization or title, and also preferred pronouns, if you don't mind. And we will start with Summer Jordan.
Okay, well, hello everybody. My name is Summer Jordan. I'm currently the Black Student Union president. I use she, her, hers pronouns. Tonight, I just look forward to everybody maintaining a safe space and remember that this is an apolitical conversation. I guess the goal, I want like everybody to be engaging and let's just try to scratch the surface on how we can at least try to promote change in our community as well as on campus.
As we can see, I'm probably going to be the one to forget to turn on their mic. No, Donovan, you are next.
Hi, I am Donovan Gaffney. I'm a fourth year student here in Bowling Green. I am the founder of On Par, a new group on campus, social justice group. And I use he, him, his pronouns. And I'm excited to hear, oh, sorry about that. I don't know what that was. I'm sorry to have a healthy conversation on something that is very essential this time in our lives.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Bryce?
Hey, I'm Bryce. I'm a fourth year here. I will soon to be fourth year here at Bowling Green. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a visual communication technology major, and I'm here representing Brave, a new, sort of newer Black initiative group here in Bowling Green. I'm like on the board for visual branding and donor relations for them. I'm I'm also here representing Kings. That is knowledge is necessary for growth and success. That's a Black male-led initiative on the campus of Bowling Green. Brave is not in any way, while students are like involved in Brave, we're not necessarily connected to Bowling Green campus. I am also representing Iota Phi Theta fraternity. That is partially here on BG campus, but more so on University of Toledo is where my chapter is from. I'm just excited to be here and, you know, just hear everybody opinion and perspective on a lot of things, just finally uniting and speaking about various topics.
Thank you.
Did you say William? I didn't hear if he's. Okay. Oh, okay. You were muted. I couldn't hear you. All right. I'm William Peterson, president of NPAC, also a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. I do want to say welcome to everybody. I'm excited to be here and share what I know. One thing I do enjoy is seeing people come together and people actually sitting down and taking the time out of their day to have a conversation about things that we may not have conversations about usually. So I do want to applaud everybody as far as people on the panel and the guests that are here today. Just know that we are all here to improve our community. So I want to thank you all for being here and taking time out of your day.
Thank you. Mr. Darrow.
My name is Daryl Owens. I went to Bowling Green from 2001 to 2004. Ended up transferring. I graduated from Walsh University. I'm representing Crossover Academy, a school that I founded and I teach at, founded 3 years ago. So I was thinking earlier, I'm 36 years old and seeing that y'all are still in college, fresh into college, some of y'all, it's motivating and inspiring to see y'all at such a young age doing the work that y'all are doing. I wasn't mentally, nor was I intellectually in a space from 18 to 25 to do what y'all are doing tonight and what y'all have done in the past. So I applaud y'all for that. And I just appreciate an opportunity to share space with y'all.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Thomas Edge, please, if you will.
Hi, I'm Dr. Tom Edge. I'm heading into my 10th year as a faculty member in the Department of Ethnic Studies at BGSU. I also serve as the Director of Undergraduate Studies for the School of Cultural and Critical Studies here. So I advise students in ethnic studies, women, gender, sexuality studies, pop culture, and American culture studies. I'm here tonight mostly because my academic background is primarily in African American studies. That is primarily what I teach, and I'm hoping to be able to provide a little bit of expertise towards some of the discussion going on. And I'm also just thrilled to be able to have these discussions outside the classroom and see how many members of this community really want to learn more about what's going on today.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. So with such a robust panelist, we are going to start with our questions. And I, again, asked Dr. Edge prior to our conversation tonight if he would not mind, due to his expertise and some of his educational background, giving us the definitions for racism, privilege, and discrimination. And after Dr. Edge is done, if some of our panelists would not mind to join in and share in some of their experiences or narratives and some of those terms that were just brought up.
Okay. I'm actually glad that we're starting with this because I think this is where a lot of confusion starts when we begin having any discussion about racism. Is just how do we actually define the term? And there are too many people who will try to stick to a strict dictionary definition that doesn't take some really important things into account. For purposes of this discussion, when we talk about racism, we're looking at systems of inequality that are rooted in racial identity. Now, oftentimes that definition gets lost in popular discussion as people try to focus it on maybe individual actions, individual ideas. What is in a person's heart? That's why it's important to differentiate between racism as a system versus discrimination. Discrimination can happen at the individual level when a person is acting upon a negative racial perception of somebody. There is certainly discrimination that is part of any racist system. But we try to set a limit between what is the difference between an act from one individual person versus what is actual systemic racism. So when we use the term racist here, try to keep that systemic definition in mind. Even when we look at an act of discrimination, think about, does it relate to larger systems of inequality within that society? Bringing privilege in it's usually used to allow us to look at the flip side of racism, because when we talk about racism, we usually have that focus on how is a group negatively affected, and we don't think about, well, how does the dominant group benefit within a racist system? Privilege allows us to talk about that. Privilege can refer to direct benefits, that, for instance, you are more likely to have employment, more likely to be able to buy a home, more likely to do A, B, and C. It can also be that you're in situations where you don't have to think about your racial identity, where you have one less thing to worry about, where you are not being overtly oppressed because of your race. I think those are the easiest definitions, and I know we've got 2 hours. I don't want to take up those 2 hours. But I'd be happy, Tony, if you want me to add anything to that, be happy to, but I think that gives us a good starting point.
Absolutely. That is actually a great capture of what I think that can start us off with. If people have more questions to that, feel free to put those in the chat and we can dive deeper. But like Dr. Edge said, we do not have more than 2 hours, and we want you to come away with some reflection, not just some summations or some deliberate educational components just preaching at you. So if you do have more defined questions as it pertains to race, privilege, that type of thing, hopefully by conversation, we'll delve deeper into that. But going to the panel now, maybe 1 or 2 people would like to kind of talk about their experiences as it pertains to racism on an individual level, or systemic racism that you've seen or that has impacted you, privilege on the same token, discrimination, just wanting to see your thoughts, getting started in that.
I have one.
Okay, thank you. I was going to say, do I have to be the educator?
No, it's more, you got to think of all these situations and pick the best ones, right? Well, not the best ones anymore, ones that stuck with me. I have a couple about discrimination. One is in Bowling Green. Like, I went to Petco with my my mom, and I don't know what the heck I was buying. But anyway, there was no staff out because it's like during Corona, so they limited staff and whatever. And so I found this guy who worked there finally, and he was doing something on the windows. And I was like, "Excuse me, sir, can I get some help?" And then he just walked into the staff room. And I'm like, I know you heard me, because everybody else from across the store heard me. And, you know, he's this white guy. He was a young white guy, though. And I was like, what did I do wrong? I was being nice, and your job is to help me. And so I was kind of hurt by that, but not too much. It wasn't like another situation I had, Franklin Park Mall. I had a few situations, but one time I was there, and I was looking at my girlfriend when I go to Pandora. I was like, please, no, not Pandora. No. And so I went there, and there's had these white people in there, and then the workers were there. And I'm just looking. The lady's like, well, do you need any help? I said, no, I'm just looking. So we were looking, and she followed us on the other side of the glass, step by step by step. And I was like, we gotta get out of here. I'm not about to be watched. The Pandora is not even that big. It's if you've ever been there, it's not that big. So you can tell obviously she was just watching me step by step by step. And then so I went to like a Foot Locker store. I was like, there's some black people here, made me feel comfortable. I ain't buying no shoes, but at least, and it's just little things like that. And they're more, it wasn't like openly racist. They're kind of like microaggressions. Because she didn't really do anything at all, but like made me feel uncomfortable. I know what she was doing. Anybody with eyes could tell. So those are a few examples, just going shopping.
To kind of go off what Donovan was speaking about, the microaggressions, I guess my experiences in Bowling Green regarding like racism has to do with the not as blatant, not as, verbal or physical, but like it's just the process of doing things, the types of reactions I get, me doing the same things my white counterpart would do. Just actually today, me, going through the process of finding a new apartment or, finding any type of customer service, I feel as though I don't get as much willingness to help or willingness to work necessarily with me. And I know I don't get as much willingness to help or people trying to work with me just based off me either watching my white counterpart go or talk about the same type of problems or same type of things that they go through and them receiving different type of treatment that I would receive or different type of advantage that I would receive or just the simple demeanor or, like I said, the willingness to work and help. And I don't get that. I don't get that. Me driving, I get pulled over often, not because I'm necessarily breaking the law or I'm speeding. It's like little minor, like me not having my lights on at dusk, where it's subjective, people don't have their lights on, it's still sunlight. Me following a car these are actual examples that me following a car too closely in traffic downtown, like just and it's not immediate. I'm followed by cops often. Like it seems like it's already a lot of cops in Bowling Green. Every time I pass a cop parked, it's 70% chance, and it's higher than that I will be followed for whatever reason. I'm not paranoid. I know I'm not paranoid. I know it isn't coincidence. These is actual stuff that I go through any given day. So just little stuff like that. It's just I could tell,
Sure, and you both brought up something really important, and I really would like someone to speak to this. First, if I could have somebody define what is a microaggression. That was brought up a couple of times with both Donovan and Bryce, and I would like someone to give another type of example of what that might look like, maybe at BGSU or MBG. What is a microaggression, and how is that played out for you?
I define it as like an indirect or a subtle discrimination. And I guess the best example I could give, again, I transferred from Bowling Green May of 2004, but that final spring semester, that's when I met my wife, and my wife is white, and on that day we happened to be in my room, and I lived in Rogers Hall, and I believe Rogers Hall got knocked down, but I mean, I had stayed in Rogers Hall, so it's myself, it's about 3 or 4 other teammates, all black, and we were either playing on a video game or we were just talking, just chilling, laughing, joking around. And again, at that point in time, my girlfriend was sitting in the room with us, and the RA walks past. And again, we just laughing, doing the normal things that college students do. So he walks past, and when he walks past, he kind of looks in the room. He keeps going, and he doubles back. And when he doubles back, he points to my wife, and he calls her out into the hall. And when she comes out to the hall, he's asking like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And she's looking at him like, "Yeah, I'm okay." He says, pulls her out a little bit more. Are you sure? Are you safe in there? Do you need help? And she says no, and she comes back into the room and she tells us what happened. And just the fact that the RA would think that she was in danger simply because she was in the room with us. Again, door was open. Nothing was going on, just a normal laughing and joking around. But for me, that's the perfect example of a microaggression.
So like, for an example would be that you're pretty for a Black girl. Like something like that would be a form of microaggression. I get that a lot, like just working. Just because it's recorded, I'm gonna say that none of my statements have anything to do with Kroger, although I work there. So that, you know, legally I have to say that. While working, I guess something that's like reoccurring is like with my hair. If it's a certain way, I get treated differently as far as customers and guests. If it's something more natural, it's just more so like aggressive, like if I'm in someone's way or like someone needs something, it's just more so like, hey, where's this, or something like that. Whereas if I have like my hair straight or, you know, extensions or something of that sort, is more so, yeah, I love your hair and things like that. What are you mixed with? And oh, you're pretty, you know, and things like that. So I guess, again, like something that's unintentional, I think sometimes it can be intentional, but most of the time I do think that it's unintentional. Another instance at work was during when Corona like first made its scene here within the United States. It hadn't even touched BG yet, but a coworker, I guess just by me being Black, kind of assumed I was dirty and I had something. So yeah.
Wow. And those are very interesting kind of narratives to tell, but how do we share with others who are in this call today? How do we say to someone who may not know that they're committing a microaggression, like, right? Like they're doing it out of what they assume to be in a place of concern or just pure interest. Wow, your hair is so pretty. What can you say to this person who is unsure of what that looks like for them, or unsure of how that plays out in their personal life? How can they think about microaggressions moving forward?
I think you mentioned a very good point, Tony, with that. A lot of times it's just if we are able to provide knowledge, because some people, they, you know, ignorant, sometimes maybe ignorant to things that they are doing, like with those microaggressions, like we said, it's very subtle. And I work at the Jerome Library, and my boss, she had sent out a message to us, and she was basically apologizing to the like the Black workers who worked there, because she had realized she was, you know, kind of, realized she was doing a lot of things like microaggressions basically towards us, which I personally really didn't notice because I kind of like have a blind eye to it sometimes, just because I maybe be so used to it. But she had apologized, but she had read a book basically. So I know she had read a book about microaggressions and racism, and how we our point of, like the point of view that different people have. So I think it's important for when we do experience those microaggressions to try to see where we can shed knowledge and not take it so personally, even though it may hurt our feelings sometimes. Still try to think about how to move forward, even though, you know, we may feel hurt or something. So it's important to still try to share that knowledge with them, because they may have, somebody who's committing those microaggressions may have never heard about or may not know about hair, and how that's part of history as African Americans. Our hair is very important to us, or our hair is a certain way. That's something that we take pride in. They may not know about those things. So being able to provide knowledge, I think that's where we start seeing that change.
I also want to say, like, it has to do with common stereotypes that we have just engraved within our brains, like unknowingly. And I do want to say that white people and people who are not of color basically are not the only ones that can do or have microaggression towards others. So it's important for like everyone, I believe, to just like know, I wouldn't say know your role. I don't think that's what I'm trying to say, but like it's important to just be adhere to your surroundings and things that are going on, because like just how someone may assume like, hey, I want some fruit, and one of your friends bring you watermelon. Well, why would you assume that I wanted watermelon? You get what I'm saying? So it's just an unknown, like it just goes like water off your back. You don't really acknowledge it, like you said, Pete. Like that's just something that's common. But I don't know. I guess another like question I want to ask like everybody is like, how can we be acknowledgeable to microaggression?
Sounds like anybody's question. Summer's playing the role of host today. No, I'm just kidding. But for real, I want to kind of piggyback off of that, because I think that plays into what Dr. Edge was talking about with privilege, and how sometimes we assume the role of privilege and not knowing. It's a kind of a way of being for a lot of people, and especially when you come up in a space and place for our society, we've been put on these certain types of pedestals, and with that kind of being said, intentionally or unintentionally, we might come into a space where we assume about somebody else around us, and we are naturally wanting to get to know other people and connect with people, find the similarities. So, wow, Summer, your hair is so long. How'd you get it so long from one day when I saw you? It wasn't like that to the next day. Now it is. Can you explain more about that? But it's also in how I asked Summer, and how she got her hair to look and be styled in such a way, when just yesterday it was just so short, and today it is past her shoulders. So what happened to where you got your hair so long, right? So I think it's a place of assuming or unassuming our privileges in our spaces. But I would yield the floor to anybody else who wants to answer kind of Summer's question.
Can you repeat the question one more time, please?
So I said, like, how can we be more like acknowledgeable of microaggression? I think like, do you guys think that that should be like some course that BG teaches, like just how when you're entering freshman year you have to take a drug and alcohol course? Like, should that be a course that you have to do for entry, like just knowing what microaggression is, just so you know? Because BG is like big on inclusivity.
Yeah, I think when you talk about that course, being somebody that's in the education field, if I remember right, I believe you need 6 credit hours of history when you talk about your prerequisite classes. So I believe that one of those history classes should be an introduction to Black studies or introduction to African American studies. Simply being that a lot of the things that we're talking about now are discussed in that class. And I think a lot of the issues that we run across are simply because of ignorance, and having a class like that introduces a lot of people to those topics. I had a lot of white friends, and I have a lot of white coworkers who going from elementary to high school, they never had Black classmates. They never had a Black teacher. Their only exposure to Black people was the media. And we all know how the media does for Black people. So I think when you're going into college from that environment, it's critical that you have a class like that that can start to help you to entertain these different thoughts and perspectives, and to process and just to process it all.
I think on a kind of on a more personal level, yes, I would love to see something that's more formally a part of their introduction to campus that helps them recognize this and helps them start talking about it right from the get-go. And yes, as an ethnic studies professor, I would love for you to come take classes with me. But I know that a lot of this is going to take place outside the classroom. A lot of this learning is going to be in the moment when these things happen. And I think if there's one message about this I would love to get through to white members of our audience, it's that when you get challenged on this, take a breath, listen, and don't react right away. Because I think there's often the tendency when a white person is called on microaggression or a more overt example of racism, there's that tendency to be defensive, that no, but I'm a good person, this must be a personal attack on me, rather than listening to how have your words or actions affected another person. And the more we as white people get used to standing back, listening, okay, how did this affect you? Why did it affect you that way? What is the deeper meaning behind this that I may not get? Then the better we're going to be at having these deeper discussions about racism, really understanding how microaggressions fit into this, and then avoiding them in the future. So, I'll be the first to admit, I have a PhD in African American Studies. That doesn't mean I never commit any microaggressions. And I get called on it. And when I get called on it, I have to sit back, I listen, I think about it, and then I work on how do I make this better? How do I avoid making the same mistake in the future? And how do I genuinely make it up to the person that I've just done this to? If you can do that, then you're going to be in great shape. Then you're actually trying to make a positive contribution moving forward. If you're just hung up on getting defensive and no, this isn't who I am, there's no real room for growth there.
To kind of add to what he was saying, I just want to kind of stress the importance of microaggressions, for me, and how impactful that they are, because I just feel like, in a way, they just keep reinforcing stereotypes in a way, and they just keep there's like what you were saying, there's just no growth from it. So while some people may think oh, it's this little, that's all, no, it's a lot bigger than that. And that's why when someone commits a microaggression or anything regarding it, that's why it's just so important to be called out upon. But that's all.
Right, the name of it might be misleading just because it says microaggression. Everybody thinks micro means small. It's not a big effect. It's not really necessarily pertaining to, micro is not pertaining to the effect it has on someone. It's pertaining to the subtleness of it. So that still can be a big effect on somebody. But once again, it is a two-way street, and it's of course, microaggressions, we look at them as negative. And like Thomas was saying, if you do commit a microaggression, don't get hung up on it. It's all about improvement. That's kind of where that's the main thing that we want to stress, is just the improvement from being better than you were previously to being better, basically, you know what I mean? So it's all about improvement. Don't get hung up on those things. People of color, Black people, we are excited to try to bridge the gap, honestly, so we can eliminate these things. So don't be afraid to also ask questions. If you have a question, like we were saying, it's okay. Just how you ask it, like Tony was saying earlier. Just don't be afraid to ask and have those conversations.
And while asking questions is important, you don't also want to just be careful not to turn this into, you're going to be my personal instructor on all things related to this group. Aside from the fact that erases the fact that there are big differences in how people live within any racial group, between the experiences that they have, you're also extracting a lot of emotional labor from that person to sit there and teach you. When people have written entire books on this, when there are great videos to watch, when there's a ton of resources, more resources than ever before for you to also learn about this. So part of it is also the nature of your relationship with that person, if you think they'd be comfortable having that conversation, but you just try not to put everything on that person to become your instructor in all things related to race.
Daryl, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just gonna make a comment in regards to what the professor had said in regards to these out of classroom experiences, in which I do agree. But I just wanted to add that what I like about students being required to have these discussions in the classroom format is, I heard somebody say, and I hope I could say this, they said the truth shall set you free, but first it'll piss you off. When you have these experiences outside of the classroom, if it pisses you off, you're free to just walk away from it. But when you have these conversations inside the classroom, you have to entertain this conversation for a semester. So I like that the classroom puts people in a position to have these conversations and not being able to walk away from it.
Absolutely. I put in the comments that I heard it from a song by Pharrell.
Could be.
So music is an educational tool. I've been listening to Hamilton all week. So with that being said, I actually want to go to the conversation of education, and specifically as we do have some community members in our midst, but also we have a few students and maybe some staff faculty. How do we make BG and BGSU a safe learning environment for people who want to ask questions, but also for our students who are Black, Indigenous, people of color? Like, where can we start to create spaces that are safe for our students, but also for people to engage in these kinds of dialogue? We're not always going to have a safe town hall like this, right? Where people are going to be willing to come into a voluntary conversation. It's gonna hit you in the face. And maybe one day you're gonna be in Dr. Edge's class and somebody's gonna say something that is not going to be an appropriate kind of comment or appropriate questioning. So how do we make BG and BGSU a safer type of environment to engage in these types of dialogue, or safe in general? We can start with our educators if we would like.
Tony, is this oh, sorry. I was
I'm
going to
sorry.
ask, is the question it's open for community people too, or just panel?
Only the panel.
Okay. Well, go ahead, Daryl.
Is the question, when you talk about a safe space, are you talking about for black students, or are you talking about for all students?
Black students and other students of color first. And then if you want to touch on other students who don't identify, that is perfectly fine.
I would say academic counselors that guide you through the process of graduating. If I'm being honest, I'm not proud to say it, but it took me a little bit under 7 years to graduate and get my degree. In those 6 years and however many months, I was never able to speak to a counselor. I was just kind of just figuring it out. And not only would it have been nice to have been able to have speak to somebody to walk me through that process, but if I would have been able to also have just different conversations about, again, going back to that history class, somebody letting me know that I don't have to take American History 1. I could actually take an Introduction to Black Studies class. So I think it's important. I think the counselors play an important role to putting students in position in these classes to have those conversations and go through, just go through that whole process.
Thank you. Bryce, did you have a comment? I'm sorry, go ahead, Dr. Edge.
Oh, I was about to ask Bryce if, yeah, because I saw he'd unmuted for a second. Okay. I was going to say, based on things that I've heard from my students, especially in African American Studies classes over the years, one thing I would encourage fellow educators to really reflect on first is building on what we were just talking about, microaggressions in the classroom. I hear from so many students of color who are maybe one of one or two Black students in a class, and they get called on to specifically address, well, how do Black people feel about this? As if there is only one Black opinion to be found on any given issue. I've also heard reports from students who go into certain classes, I'm not going to call out any departments here, but who hear professors using gross stereotypes, very broad stereotypes about Black communities in their teaching. So I think for educators, one big thing is to really look through and evaluate, how is it that you talk about race? Are you talking about this from a base of knowledge? Or are you really basing it on either outdated information or stereotyping? There is so much good new information that anybody in any department can incorporate into their curriculum and show the relevance of talking about race today. And I stress any department. So encouraging professors to think about how they can make those connections naturally with what they teach would be a great way to engage more students of color constructively and to show that they are reflected in what is being taught. I think the only other thing I would add is just for professors to set really good expectations the first day of class about how they intend to have those kinds of discussions. You know, when I teach, I very explicitly say, I teach from an anti-racist point of view, that I understand for some people, there might be a fear of, well, I might say this wrong. And I'm like, look, I'm not as hung up on that. That's something we can talk about and we can work on. But if you come in here just spewing out gross stereotypes, if you are mimicking some of the worst things that you hear about Black people, then you just know that I'm going to push back against that. And if I need to do that in order for everybody to really feel comfortable being in that class, and I need especially white students to understand that.
I was gonna say,
Oh, go ahead, Donovan.
we haven't mentioned, I think it's important to have just, you know, people of color, Black, Indigenous as faculty in teaching the classes. So I know for me, I grew up, before I moved to Ohio, I grew up in a suburb of Detroit. So I had white teachers and Black teachers, and I felt really comfortable because like there was some connection there. And then when I moved to Ohio, just like 30 miles out from UG, everybody was white, and I just couldn't do it. It was really hard to bond or get some type of connection. It's really hard to like learn because I didn't really care. I didn't feel like they cared about me. Not because they were just white. It was just like everything was geared toward the white population, which is what most school districts do. You like teach according to your population and demographic. But so when I got to BG, I mean, it's basically the same thing. So that's why I enjoy taking the ethnic study courses, because there's people who look sort of like me in them classes teaching it, but it kind of gives students hope and stuff. But also when like someone, like a white student will say something out of line, or like they, you know, says a term wrong, the professor was able to just go, hey, try this word, you know, replace it. I mean, I've been in Dr. Edge's classes a couple times, he would do it, or Dr. Moreno, somebody say, usually the terminology is, hey, we don't use that word anymore, use this term. It's something simple, but if you don't really have the faculty or staff to do so, then the conversation or the dialogue or society isn't really going to grow because nobody's really stepping in to correct that.
Sure. And that really takes us, oh, I'm sorry, Bryce, did you have something you wanted to add, please?
I do apologize for like keep muting and unmuting, distracting y'all from I was just about to add, like, I kind of feel like given like the climate of what's going on, you know, and, you know, the country right now, I feel like the school could, you know, be a little more vocal about possibly, you know, racism. Not necessarily talking about all they have to, you know, post posters up everywhere, but like I just feel like they can be more a part of, you know, what we're trying to do here and what type of community we want. I feel like they could you know, I feel like any steps that we're striving to do, you know what I'm saying, regarding Bowling Green and like our treatment of us as a people is what is based on what we have done, you know, based on what work that we have done, like having town halls like this to, you know, to help us, you know what I'm saying? And in essence, I feel like all this time we just only be helping ourselves, you know what I mean? And for us to be, you know, a part of your community and, you know what I'm saying, and you in ways benefiting from us and our people at the school, I feel like you definitely should be a little more vocal about, you know what I'm saying? Like, we're your students too, you know what I mean? And for any Bowling Green student, for us to be feeling at all this way, you know what I'm saying, it definitely says something because, you know, we're not hearing complaints from white students often all the time, or white students aren't going through these same problems. They're not. Well, from what I'm hearing, from my experiences, and I just feel like they don't take our claims or our problems as seriously. You know, they don't. So I just feel like the school, like some of the people like a little bit higher up, could definitely be a little bit more vocal about a lot of things.
Daryl, I see your hand. Go ahead.
I said, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to have my hand up there. I apologize.
Tony, if I could add anything, I think that like BG definitely has done better than before with setting the tone. When I initially got here, you know, as a freshman, I don't think the campus was like as woke as it can be now, or as it is now. There were a few run-ins with not only like microaggression, but just racism, you know, like around campus. And I think that President Rogers is like, he does the best he can as far as listening to the voice of the students, along with like listening to the Black Student Union. So I think that BG is doing better with it. There's always room for improvement, but I think with the start, when trying to target the student body and people within the community, just because BG is basically or in my opinion, the community of BG, I think that it definitely needs to start with like administration setting the tone for what is expected, whether that's within our curriculum, inclusivity, like being in that, or just promoting it around campus. Again, like Bryce was saying, not with like billboards and all that, but I know like Not in Our Town does a good job with events and things. So just seeing a little bit more of that, I think would be good.
Sure. And actually that leads me to my next question. But before I do so, I wanted to share something that Ms. Kim put in the comment to say, Ohio Council of Teachers of Mathematics are trying to have many more explicit conversations in K through 12 about race and ethnicity and race issues in the classroom. And so I just really wanted to verbally share that with our audience, that it sounds like there have been some active moves with the state and with the city in doing some really good progressive work in that area. But I wanted to ask other panelists, other people who haven't really spoke. So Pete, as they call you, do you mind sharing what are some other changes you want to see, or some other things that you have seen BGSU do so far that you would like to see more of? Maybe taking more of an active role in the type of education and the type of safety they're providing for their students.
So I do like to see what I have actually been seeing is organizations being formed, at least from the students. That's the main population, and in order to feel safe, I feel like the students need to need to take that step as well to improve. But student organizations being made, so like there's an organization called Inclusive and Cultural Responsive Educators that this girl Kate on campus started. I'm actually a part of that. I'm an education major myself. It's basically an organization that she started in order for us to basically be aware of, for teachers of all backgrounds to be able to learn about the culture of different students, different backgrounds. Because a lot of the times that we were saying, I keep going back to how knowledge is really the main thing that, will help us out a lot. Just being able to have those resources for the students to be able to, especially the education majors, to be able to be prepared for when they get in the field for different things that can come up in those different conversations that come up in a lot of young people of color, or even people in poverty, I should say, and that's sometimes usually coexist with being a person of color. With that, it's kind of, those kids go through a lot of different things at an early age. So we don't necessarily understand that the trauma that students can go through in their home lives, and then they come in the classroom and we think it's just supposed to be okay. So being able to be prepared for that going into the field, I think that's a good step. And that's something I've seen at BG, that we've had that org being created at BG is a great step in the right direction. And we also have faculty and staff involved in that as well. So we have, I know a couple Black faculty members that are involved with us, and this is the first year it's going to be on campus. So if any of you are education majors or haven't heard of it, you definitely can tap in with me, and we can get you, involved in that org. And then, I mean, that's pretty much what something positive I've seen. I would like to see more things like that, and I would like to, as Bryce was saying earlier, the higher ups, for them to be able to use their voice more for us to help us feel more comfortable, and like there is a change coming, and that we are actually seeing and our problems are being heard. So for instance, this town hall, I see a lot of positive things. This town hall, different orgs having different events about the climate of our campus. And I do think we are moving in the right direction. So I'm seeing a lot of good things, actually, Tommy.
I also think it's important us, as we're being a part of different organizations and groups, because often at times, instances in the past about organizations stepping on organizations' toes, or, what I'm saying, regarding certain events or topics that both organizations are both addressing. I just want to say, I feel like in most cases, the problem is a lot bigger than us as organizations, and we're all, at the end trying to get to the same, have the same goal in terms of how we want our community to be. So I just ask that, we all just remember we're all on the same team, and let's just all work together, use each other's resources as the best we can, to boost one another. So that's all.
That's actually, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dr. Edge. Yes.
Got to unmute yourself.
I'm back. Got it. I want to be as diplomatic as possible in how I say this. Colleges and universities, when they have made positive strides in how students are treated in the racial campus on climate, or the racial climate on campus, it tends to come from pressure from students themselves. Most institutions of higher education do not engage in these conversations willingly. They do not engage in change willingly. It's when students force the issue that something happens. And so going back to the point that Bryce was raising about different organizations, about what they're doing, about sometimes the conflict that can arise between organizations, I think one important thing is to get those groups working together behind some common goals, and most importantly, to sustain momentum over time. It's really easy to get a student movement going, and then suddenly you hit summer break, you lose momentum, and people come back in the fall and forget what you were doing in the spring. And at some institutions, that's what they want. So it's important to get a movement together that really brings people working together and keeps it going for the long run until you get what you want.
That's actually a good point, and somebody mentioned it Another question that was brought up, how can various student groups come together as one big kind of rainbow coalition, as they put it? Like, what are some concrete things that orgs can do to intentionally work together to showcase that kind of camaraderie or that togetherness that Dr. Edge was kind of speaking of? And all of you are leaders, so I expect all of you to speak.
Well, okay, I'll go. Well, I think it's important for us to utilize our undergrad student government, because they have a lot of connections already. It's not, I don't think it's, I mean, I don't really not a big believer in recreating the whole wheel. I think it's good that we use what we have and then let's advance that. So people from different, at least representatives from different organizations, if we all can have, a person be a part of USG for representation, so we can have that ear to the students, and then also have an ear to those higher ups that we were talking about, who make changes and make things happen. We can use that platform already of USG and kind of like make that what it's supposed to be. That's where the collective is supposed to be, and the student voice is supposed to be in that. So we need a proper representation in that org, and that's kind of how we can come together, everybody, and be able to put our thoughts in, put all our heads together, and make real change on campus.
I want to say, like, it also like starts with communication. I feel like there's a lot of disconnect between orgs on campus, whether that's within Black community or just around BG. Like, I think because most of our thoughts kind of intersect on what we want to see as far as like change or like service we would like to do amongst each other. I think that it's just important for us to have like sit down conversations about what's going on, just as we're doing within the town hall, and just like sharing that dialogue. Okay, well, this is what we want to plan to do. Okay, we were thinking the same thing. How about we work together? And that's something we can do to not only like collab with, but also uplift each other, provide knowledge to one another, and just like become more united. I think that's a start.
Bryce or Donovan, do you guys have any particular things you would like to say to that?
We'll kind of just go off what Summer and Pete was saying. I feel like we could do better at using our resources. And when I say resources, I mean our networks of people, because a lot of times, especially in the city of Bowling Green, what I'm starting to realize is it's like a lot of decisions are being made merely based off like the same demographic of people, or like all the same issues, like at town hall meetings or at various events regarding like the outcome of, or like the state of like the city. It's the same people there. It's the same leaders. It's the same people who's, I don't know how to necessarily put it into words, but every org or every group has different networks of people, and unfortunately, some networks are a little bit more impactful than other networks. And in our case, I feel like in terms of Brave, since we're a Black community organization, trying to actually like talk to the city and get ourselves within this conversation, within this group or network of people to actually be heard is very important. A lot of the people who, run the city or just like, involved in the city, they kind of have like their own, they don't really connect like with us unless we reach out to them, like I was saying, like they, and like Tony was saying, they don't really know a lot of the problems that's necessarily going on until we say something to them, in a way. So I think if we share, networks, share our resources, and kind of connect each other with different groups of people, we'll definitely be able to, get somewhere. But that's all.
Yeah, I want to kind of piggyback, but there's a question that what Martin had posted about Greek life. I know a few of us on the panel.
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
And I am as well. I'm in one of them white fraternities or whatever. but I like their philanthropy tour joint. But anyway, we all have our own. Greek life is so big on campus, more than other campuses, and I feel like if we all kind of had some type of, I'm saying it wrong. If we all would get together as, start with our little rivalries and stuff, if we all would get together and like make a whole sort of like, I want to say Greek campus, that sound wrong. We already have that with like IFC and the multicultural ones, but they would get on the same like page and method. Like all the leaders from their fraternities and sororities would make like an open statement or get together and have their own little town hall like this and like petition the school about it. I think that'd be really impactful. A lot of students are part of these organizations. I think that would be a good way to go about it.
Sure, and actually going off of that, Donovan, you did bring up Martin's question specifically for our audience who may not have seen it. Martin is asking, what changes would the panel like to see come from this community and the Greek community, the student community and the Greek community on campus, and that is at BGSU. So what kind of changes do you think would be impactful? And Donovan shared some more cohesiveness between the councils and some more cohesiveness between different individual fraternities and sororities. But to that end, what are some other changes that could happen?
I feel like that's a question I would probably pose to the audience. I mean, I'm not going to, but that's a question I would want to ask the audience. In all honesty, like I said before, I'm the president of NPHC, National Pan-Hellenic Council, on campus, and I do think just that platform, the Greek platform, is very important. We are held to a higher standard on our campus, and throughout campuses, across the nation, pretty much. As far as changes, we do talk about a lot of being inclusive. So, just the fact that we even say white fraternities and sororities and then the black fraternities and sororities, I mean, that's due to history, of course. So, that's just kind of how it is. But I think the change that can be, like Donovan was saying a little bit, just even though we do have those differences, not letting that divide us as far as our impact that we make. So we don't want to really, the change, instead of us competing with one another, a change I would like to see is us collabing more, if where possible. It doesn't have to be all the time, but definitely just to show that there is unity on our campus, and we are able to connect with people who are different than us, just to have that about our campus on BG, because we've had a lot of things that have went wrong in our Greek community, in a sense, or a lot of negative things that we didn't necessarily want to happen or want to be looked at as. So I think it's important for us to change the dynamic and change the image that we have on our campus of white fraternities and black fraternities and sororities.
Yeah, actually, that was something that I see here as a question that we came up with, or not as we, that were brought up as some of the questions that came through. But how does race play into our Greek communities? Like, what are some of the things that we're seeing that come up as people are going in and they're going to informationals, or they're going to through the processes or educational processes, as you will, like how does race play a particular role inside the Greek community?
All right, I'm gonna take that one too.
Okay.
Don't
bring anybody up. No, I'm just kidding.
I just figured I probably should speak on it, but like I was saying on it before, though, pretty much race is like, it's basically the history of the different councils. Is just traditionally in NPHC we have a lot of African American people of color, and then of course with MGC it's called multicultural, so you have different cultures with that as well. And then IFC usually it's where you see a lot of white people as far as those councils. But so if it's kind of hard for somebody to be that outlier and try to, like Donovan, I actually applaud you for being an IFC, because that would be hard for, you probably a lot of things that you could have tried, or you could have tried to come be a part of MPAC Greek life, but you chose to join that. Even when you might possibly not be accepted, you still went along and did that. And I feel like it just takes courage in order to try to sometimes be that outlier. But at the end of the day, I feel like people are afraid they won't be accepted if they try to join, but it's like you gotta just try it. And if it's something that you really want to do, you'll fight through those things. Like nothing that sometimes, a lot of things in life aren't easy. So with that being said, race is considered, I would say race is considered by more so the aspirant rather than the org. They put like the aspirant usually puts their own limitations on themselves because they don't see people like them in those orgs. So I would say just don't assume that an org, if you're black, or if you're black, that you won't be able to get accepted into IFC, or if you're white, you won't be able to get accepted into MPAC. You just gotta just try it out and see. So I think if the aspirants give the councils the opportunity to change, then we're all open to that.
Thank you. And Bryce and Donovan, please give your thoughts, but I just want to share something really quickly. I think a lot of times from an administrative point of view, if you will, sometimes the history of an org becomes more prevalent inside of the how do I want to say this? It becomes more prevalent, not just based off of view, but also some traditional things that have been passed down, right? Like, so it becomes a little more, it becomes harder to kind of see yourself if you're not actively recruited, if you will, or if you're not actively seeing those spaces where normally a person or a group of people might typically see themselves being in. So for instance, in my past experience being at other institutions, there's usually an open forum for Greek life, and there's usually some traditional things that will happen in which an NPHC member might come up and invite their other NPHC, National Panhellenic Council, traditionally Black Greek letter orgs will come up, and maybe they'll do a step, and then, or they might do a stroll, a dance, if you will, a line to kind of introduce themselves. And then other people are like, wow, that's super cool, but how do I then kind of bring myself to that? Because I can't dance, stepping's not in my nature, I don't know XYZ, and historically it does not sound like I can be a member. Vice versa to that, maybe it doesn't look like, because I'm different from an IFC chapter or another type of chapter, that doesn't look like traditionally I can fit inside of this particular organization. And so that then plays a role into how the recruitment process is brought in a little more for a student who may not naturally see themselves being a part of the organization. And I think that that's where some of the conversations are happening, right? Like we're trying to figure out where to not make it so that it's that much harder for a person to get into your organization. And by your, it's the infamous your, not your as in Pete or your as in Bryce or Donovan. It's the overarching your, right? Like how can someone see themselves inside of a particular organization that traditionally hasn't included them in the first place?
One of our commenters, kind of piggybacking off of that, had mentioned that legacy appointments for some Greek organizations are also feeding into that problem, where if you had a parent, another close relative who was a member, you get might get preference in terms of being selected, and how, given who traditionally went to college in American history, that has trickled down effects, just as it does for legacy admissions to colleges. So it looks like she mentioned that she's trying to be part of the solution in changing that in her own organization. So perhaps one thing that a lot of organizations can do is, as you were saying, Tony, look more at who they are actively recruiting. Look at maybe some of the systems they have in place that are preventing new members, people from different groups, from joining, or from thinking, well, I just don't belong there.
Donovan, I see a head nod. Do you want to comment on that?
Sorry, I was trying to use my cursor. I couldn't find the mute button. I got it. So, well, from my experience with Greek life, and how I joined my IFC fraternity, they were rechartering, so they were refounding, and I had somebody from nationals, like from North Carolina, come, and basically they gave them an email lesson. And he's like, saw my name, he's like, you got a good GPA. So then he met up with me, and it was a Black guy. And so I was like, oh, cool, there's Black people in this organization. And then he showed me his chapter and it's white people. So I thought it was more multicultural. I thought, oh, that's very cool. And I connected with the philanthropy. It was helping people with disabilities, basically. That's all we do, quality ability experience. I really connected. I grew up with disabilities. I work with people with disabilities. And so I really connected with that. And then I joined. I didn't meet anybody in the chapter already when it had started. So I kind of joined, and then after, the spring semester I started, that's when I met everybody. And I was like, oh, there's a bunch of white people. And I was really thrown off. I mean, there's one other Black person and couple Asians, but it's really overwhelmingly white. And I think that scares a lot of people like me. But I think when we are out trying to join different organizations like that, I think it's more about finding a niche and where you can fit in and people you can relate to within that. And I think that's a real struggle because there's like stigmas, like, well, they're this race and I don't fit in because they do this and I do that. Or also it's like certain people like in a race. Like sometimes I was intimidated to even join one of them, whatever, the ones that Pete and Bryce are in. I was like, I don't really like stepping. So if I try, it's not gonna work. But I think it's really about finding a niche, and that's more of an organizational thing. They're who they recruit, and they have their own little problems. But if you're actively finding like a place that you can fit in with people you feel comfortable with, that's from the inside out. Your chapter has to feel comfortable reaching out to you and finding people. And if you have more overarching values that you look in a person, then your diversity would go up because you're looking for certain qualities in a person, like leadership or accountability or something. So if that's really what you're looking for and not people who look like you, then the Greek life would be more inclusive.
Sure. I want to move into some of the conversation about allyship, and then direct our questions or our attention towards the audience. If you guys have questions that you're holding on to, and that's perfectly fine, get ready because I'm coming for you. But also, at that point, I'm going to ask that if you are willing, you can then turn on your camera if you would like, and you can ask your questions verbally, or you can just put them in the comments and I will read them for you. But we are giving the space for the audience. But I really want to move into a conversation about allyship. If a person from the panel could share what is an ally and what makes a good ally, and in addressing some of these inequalities that we're talking about, and talking about making the space inclusive, addressing some of those safe spaces, brave spaces, that type of thing. What is an ally and what makes a good ally?
So like, I can't give like the dictionary definition, but when I think of an ally, I think of somebody who may share similar oppression or somebody who may have privilege that is aware, like someone with privilege is aware of their privilege and they use their privilege to their good. So if I'm at work and somebody is being blatantly racist to me, someone who has privilege saying, hey, actually, yeah, you are being racist, and calling them out on it, and then saying like, I feel for you. I'm gonna help in any way that I can. And then also somebody who may share the same oppressions. So someone who may be of color, they can be an ally to us as far as like, I'll say for myself, I consider myself an ally to Latino Student Union. I go there and I advocate for them just as they advocate for us. Although we don't share some forms of like discrimination, we're definitely in the same boat, I feel like. So that's like more so an ally, like just it's like an acknowledgement that like we're here, like I got you, you got me, like as long as we're knowledgeable of each other, then you don't have to worry.
Daryl, you look like you have something good to say.
A little bit, just a little bit. I would say an ally is someone who is willing to actively fight for you. And in that fight, they're willing to sacrifice. I heard about this event through Matt, and we had talked about, I was telling him about the Freedom Summer of 1964, in which you had, it was a Black organization, SNCC, that was going down south to get Black people signed up to vote. But you also had thousands upon thousands of white college students that were allies and went down south with them. And they were actively fighting for Black people. But in the midst of fighting, some even lost their lives. So again, allies are not only willing to fight for you, but they understand and they've counted the cost that it's going to possibly require them losing something, but they're still willing to fight alongside.
Haley draws a good question. Thank you so much, Haley. So in the comments, she says, or I'm assuming, apologies, Haley, but they share, what are some missteps or common mistakes anyone on the panel, have seen an ally make? What are some things that you've seen allies do that are maybe missteps or mistakes?
I think a mistake an ally can do is speak on behalf of the group that they are forming allyship for. So just how I said that, I feel like I'm an avid ally to Latino Student Union. I cannot speak on what it's like to be someone within the Latino community. Like I feel like speaking on behalf of somebody who may be of color or anything like that, or me having a white ally, I can't speak on what it's like to be a Caucasian person.
To kind of go off what Summer was saying, just knowing your boundaries, knowing when and where to insert yourself, and just being respectful, just regarding any type of situation that you and whoever you're helping is going through.
I think one of the mistakes or mishaps that allies will make is like trying to be the face of a movement. Like if you have an organization who's doing this and then they're trying to become the face of it and trying to, I'm say that wrong. I won't say, but anyway, you know what I'm saying. Trying to be the leading voice, and then once in history, there'll be Black organizations or movements, and then a white person is the only face of it. So then you kind of discredit the work that the people of color have done, and that's a pretty dangerous slope. So I feel like allies can kind of take a back seat to the people of the movement, who the movement's actually for. And then because a lot of history, you know, you see it in movies like the black people usually the help or the partner, you know, the Robin to Batman for more like white movies and stuff. And I feel if it was like reverse during these movements, it would go a lot better. Not trying to downplay the impact of, you know, allies, but it would go a lot better. And I think the movement would move a lot further when it takes the focus away from the white people and more of the people who are being oppressed and who the movement's about.
Pete, did you have something to say? I'm sorry.
Oh no, I'll just be commenting like as people are talking about. No, I'm on mute.
I saw your mouth moving. I was like, oh, he got something to say.
Yeah, I was just thinking about what he was saying. Now how he was just basically saying how the oppressed group of that ally when it comes to, because each ally has a benefit to the other in a sense. So it's very important to realize how you, when you're an ally, what can you bring to the group and for both sides. So like I just was agreeing or hearing this point about how it's important that the side that's oppressed is the side that needs to be out and that needs to be seen the most, even though the ally may have a big impact on that group. So say for instance, white people will have a big impact because of the way they are looked at and the pool they may be able to have in certain things, like getting change in certain areas. But the face of it still should be the people who are oppressed, or black people or people of color in this situation. So I was just hearing this point and I'm saying agreeing in a sense.
I want to touch on this question that is how can, and you guys have touched on it in many different ways, but how can you avoid becoming the savior to the group that you're kind of advocating and allying for? How can you avoid being a destructive person for the group you're trying to fight for? And sometimes that happens a lot in people with activism and people who are really advocating for a particular organization or group, or et cetera, it's church, whatever marginalized group it is. How can someone avoid becoming the savior to the group, if you will?
I think it's important to, when you do try to become an ally or join a group, it's important to realize the cause instead of you as an individual, your individual drive, I should say. When you join a group, the group has a cause overall that everybody has put in effort to or believe in. So in order to try to avoid being that hero, just make sure that whatever you do is for that overall cause instead of personal gain. That's kind of when you kind of see people try to be heroes. They see that personal gain they can get out of it. And always considering, or not considering, that's not the word I'm looking for, but talking to the group as a whole before decisions are made on, before decisions are made for that group. So if you feel like you may have a drive to do something and you're not sure if that's what I'm trying to think, if you're not sure that that's what the cause, that your actions will benefit the cause, then you should talk to the group, consult. That's what I was looking for. Consult the group and see if that's a good route to take or a good action to make, and if that the group agrees. Because when not, and you're getting that personal gain, that's when you start to overtake the group, and you see how much, I think, power comes into a sense a lot. When you can feel like you might be able to get in that power, you can advance in power. That's when you start trying to be the hero and take over, and you see a lot of conflict arise with that actually.
I think the best advice I could give is going into the situation, realizing that yes, there is something that you can add to the movement, to the group, or to the issue, but also realizing there's even more that you can learn. A lot of times people go into the situation just with the mentality of what they're going to do because of the skill set that they have, and they're blind to their weaknesses. As a person who has grown to love reading, somebody who's grown to love learning. I feel like the more that I learn, the more that God reveals to me, the more that I realize that I don't know. So it's just important to go into it with a sense of humility, realizing that you're not the answer to the issue. You're simply a part in fixing and bringing a solution to the problem.
Absolutely. And I want to ask, just in general, to any person on the panel, what are you thinking some best ways that a person who finds themselves to be an ally, what are some things that they can do to kind of create action behind their allyship? Not just saying they support, but what are some things that they can actively do to show their support? Mind you, being mindful of the boundaries and being willing to take a step back so that they're not the face or the front end of it. But what are some things that they can best do to show their active support or become an activist or action-minded person behind their allyship?
I would say one of the most important things is just to vote, not try and be partisan or anything. Just like vote for issues that help end the racism systemically, and like on what did California do? The hair type stuff, they banned a little discrimination or that you can get fired for your hair. It's like vote on issues like that or help people. Register people to vote who are underprivileged, who can't really get up there and do it. Vote for laws that help the most people to vote, like for mail-in or take somebody to the polls. It's little things like that. But voting is a big thing to help change.
I think to kind of go on being a good ally is just in ways use your privilege and use your platform to, kind of talk and like reinforce, like if you support me and my group, what we're doing and believe what we're doing is right, you definitely should, be a voice for us to your group of people, to your network of people, because in some ways they'll be more likely to understand, hearing it from you than hearing it from us. So I would just say just continue to just use your privilege and just be a voice for whoever you're being an ally for.
A way that I would say, as far as like with the recent uproar of police brutality and like injustices within the Black community, donating, rallying, participating like within like the heat of what's going on. I understand that like, the situation that we're in globally, but just putting yourself in the moment and putting yourself in people's shoes and being on the front line. And one good thing I had saw like through like the news and things were like people, I'm not saying that you should be radical enough to shield someone, but like, again, using your privilege, like when someone of color is in the line of fire, just putting yourself out there and saying like, hey, this is wrong. Using your voice, I guess, is a good reason. I mean, a good thing to do. I had a thought that I was about to go off of, but I forgot it. So I'll come back.
To kind of go a little bit more along with like, using your privilege, definitely it would be nice, use your privilege to say something, to call people out in a way, because I feel like a lot of times, people might be too scared to speak up to, just in general. So like I would just say, don't be afraid to speak out and correct someone.
I think for predominantly white organizations, don't be afraid to reach out to Black organizations and simply ask, hey, what can I do? In some cases, you may have resources that you can bring to bear to help something happen. Let's say here on campus, if people collaborate on programming, you can bring people to the event. You can help put tangible resources into organizing it. But you can also, I think every white organization, every white person can also amplify Black voices. Yes, they can and should speak themselves as white people to other white people. But I think it also helps if we as white people get used to listening to Black people talking about their own experiences, trust them when they're talking about those experiences, and that we don't necessarily have to hear it from somebody who looks like me. So putting yourself in a position where you can get other people listening to Black voices and taking them seriously is just as important. I do just want to echo Summer's point, though. Actually getting involved, putting yourself on the line and turning knowledge into action is really, really crucial. I see a lot of people the last couple of months saying, hey, I'm going to read all these books. I'm going to learn what systemic racism is. Okay, now what are you going to do with it? And she really hit the nail on the head that we need to turn that into action.
Great. All good things. And I want to make sure, not make sure, I also want to add, let me say that. I will add, because I feel like a lot of times when we're saying putting yourself out there and putting yourself on the line, and a lot of people feel like we're asking you to jump in front of somebody and take the bullet. That might be another very extreme way of being an activist or an actionable person. However, what that means for me, and I won't speak on behalf of the panel, I'm speaking on behalf of a person who's done this work and engage in conversation often. That's correcting behavior in the face of what is happening, not waiting several days, several hours, several minutes, or whatever. That's correcting it in that moment and saying, hey, this is wrong and I don't support it. I don't fall in line with it. And I would like to look and be different from that. Or if you're seeing an action happening to someone and around you, you're saying, hi, I'm not going to let you do that to another person. I'm not going to let you say that about another person. That's also using the platform, as someone mentioned, and I apologize because I have my head down writing notes. Someone mentioned using your platform. So you all, in some way, shape, or form, found out about this this town hall through a social media type of blast or an email. That's a platform. Social media is huge, and you should be using that type of voice to combat the rhetoric that is out there. A lot of times I see people just bypassing it. A like is not an action. I'm sorry. A like is not an action anymore. That's not it anymore. And also on Facebook, the little heart things, no longer in action. I don't know where those came from. Maybe because of COVID, they decided to add that. But I feel like making an actionable post, that puts yourself out there in front of others. That's utilizing the voice you have to saying, I stand alongside some of these people who are oppressed, and I'm no longer involved in that. I'm no longer complicit in that. I'm no longer silent to make sure that other people know where I stand. That's the type of putting yourself out there that people are talking about that can also kind of be scary, or be fearful because you're afraid of what people are going to say about you, to you, the comments you may get. The types of people who are kind of gonna come at you and say, that's, you know what, I never seen that side of you, Summer. Where did that come from? That came from me wanting to do an actionable thing, to say, I don't stand for this. I'm not for that kind of action or activity. And I really would like to do something for my brother and sister who are in need, that type of thing. And so I wanted to say that to add to all of what everyone was saying. So we are at 8:40, and I want to give our audience an opportunity to ask questions that you all have, if you do have questions. If you want to put them in the comments, excuse me, I welcome you to do that, or you can also turn your camera on. Bobby is in the comments. I see that Bobby would like to speak. If you would like to say something, please turn your camera on. Oh, never mind. Never mind. She is physically in the space, everybody. Go ahead.
So, my question kind of piggybacks a little bit back on what Bryce was saying earlier on how people within the university or within higher power can have more say in the issues on what's going on and speaking up and being accountable. My question is, how can we make that push of them actually speaking up and being accountable with the change and progress that we want to see within our campus and community? So, because their silence is far more louder than them saying anything at all. So whether it's kind of having them within these type of conversations, maybe not a town hall, because I understand that this is supposed to be like a safe space for students and people to speak without maybe feeling like they're hindered on saying certain things. So yeah, that's my question. How can we actually push for them to speak up and be accountable?
Bobby, can I ask, who are you asking? Are you asking the panelists in general? Okay. Panelists, to you, how are you pushing and holding your counterparts accountable? Other orgs and people of the like.
Well, in Braves' case, you know, it's really it's hard, you know what I mean? You can't convince anyone to speak up, you know what I'm saying, or say anything that they don't want to say. So like, it's kind of a slippery slope. But in terms of higher power, I think it's definitely our job to definitely try to unite as best as we can to call them out, you know, to put them in a position to where, you know, they have to act. An exact example of doing that, you have to come back to me on that one. You have to come back to me.
Well, I got you, Bryce, a little bit. I can help you out for a little bit. But if I would say an example of that is definitely, at least for me personally, is using our platforms with Alpha and MPAC. Our alumni have a strong pull. With the higher ups at BG, they have a strong pull. So seeing getting the more people we can get involved in basically whatever, like Bryce was saying, calling them out, you know, if we have to send an email to them to where basically we're forcing their voice, you know, if they're staying silent, sometimes, you know, certain things they can't be silent to, because in our minds, that means that they're complying with whatever problem that we're having, that they're okay with it. So in a sense, that I know the higher ups are very, very important on what their image looks like. So we have to call them out on those flaws that we see, by getting our, like I said, alumni, our different networks that we have. We have to all come together, and you know, we can get things like petitions or stuff of that nature. So it takes work, but we can do it if we all come together. We have a lot of different people here, even on this call, that have different networks, that if we all had a problem and came to the conclusion that we all want to speak up and send an email or whatever, we definitely will be able to be noticed. You know, they definitely have to respond to us because, you know, they see that we're not backing down. So it's about being consistent. And like I said, reaching out to our networks and getting them involved as well, even people who don't go to BG anymore.
I think we can do, I'm sorry, Don.
No, go ahead.
Something that we can do, like as far as students on campus, I know that it's hard, but you just sometimes have to have those difficult conversations with your professor, especially if they do something that you don't like. Say, hey, I don't like that, and next class you need to acknowledge that I didn't like that, and you're not going to do it again. Tony had mentioned within the question prior is just like holding people accountable and addressing things right then and there, because sometimes somebody would know, or if you don't address it, they'll just keep doing it. So to get people to speak up around campus as far as like faculty, just telling them like, hey, you need to use your voice because you have pool around here, and if you value the lives of your students and just like think that your students have value, then you need to use your privilege to speak for me or on behalf of us.
I was saying that no one mentioned, I feel you hit the institution financially. Boycott something like the dining halls or the union or nest area with all the food, and enough of us just stop going, and we have a reason why they want to hit them, and then they have to listen to us. I mean, Boy Scouts have been a part of movement histories, and they seem to work. And if we get a big enough group and we just like stop buying stuff, it would hit the college financially, and then they'll have to listen because they want their money to keep on moving. I think that would be, I mean, it's more radical, but I feel like if we really are about that, that's something we could do.
Money talks. So,
Wait, one more thing to kind of just mention, and we found in terms of Brave, in cases where being radical definitely helps, but in like some situations where being radical just kind of just makes it so where like the government, like not the government, like the city's case regarding I think it was the training for the police officers, or specific training for the police officers. A lot of people, by calling them out on it, kind of took a shot at the city's ego in a way. And some ways, and with the country too, people being radical just kind of just incites, the city or the police officers also. So I think it's just about finding a way, what I'm saying, being tactical and, strategizing about us being radical too, instead of just, acting, because, just doing stuff just randomly or just without any type of strategy, kind of doesn't really get that far either. So just wanted to put that out there.
Well, you understand that and be tactical with it, obviously. But if you be radical and do something like the Money and Boy Scouts, you get the city to overreact and something forceful. Then you get this community around us to step in, or maybe even the state. It goes to extremes, like happened in South Africa as well. And it doesn't take that many people to actually start stuff and get the city on, or even like the Arab Spring, if it was just small group of people and the government overreacted, and then you get allies to come in and support, and then they feel sorry for you and want to help you out. So I think that would be I wouldn't say the goal, but that's a way to help.
Yeah, and Bobby, I would say definitely a lot of people are looking for something to be able to establish themselves as on this side of on the right side of the situation that's going on right now. A lot of people who are in privileged situations are looking for somebody just to give them opportunity so they can show, okay, I'm on y'all side. So us being able, by us just using our voice to our, like I said, network, or even put something out there where if we were to say, we need better responses for the blue light poles on campus, the safety lights. We need better response for those or whatever. And then it could be somebody who is in a privileged position. They see you say that, and they've been looking for opportunity. So they take that on and use their privilege in order to make sure that it's heard who it needs to be heard by, if that makes sense to you. So I feel like that's something that it just takes that first step to get it going, and then watch it steamroll into something bigger. So, you know, that's what I think is an important thing to do as well.
So we received a question, another one. And it says, in order to truly address racial inequality on campus, BGSU must look back and acknowledge all of its shortcomings regarding these situations in its past. What are some things BGSU can do to acknowledge these incidents in a way that prevents similar incidents from reoccurring?
I guess one way BG could react and like, I guess it would be just to acknowledge, you know, their past or like wrongdoings and share a learning opportunity for everybody. Like I said earlier, with I know like something we had to do as incoming freshmen is like a little 2-hour little video on drug and alcohol, you know, like rules around campus, just like, again, talking about racial inequalities and what we can do as a community to promote equality and diversity and inclusion. I think education is one of the like big things the university could hit on, just using the education aspect to do right by past wrongdoings.
A number of institutions of higher learning have, over the last, say, 15 years, undertaken comprehensive studies of their own histories to document, okay, what is our connection to different racist systems? I did my undergrad at Rutgers, you know, that's a university founded in 1766. And so when they studied it, they found, among other things, the use of slave labor to build parts of the campus. They realized that one of their early presidents was actually a family that owned Sojourner Truth. They started documenting financially and otherwise their connections to slavery and to systemic racism, and then tried to start laying out, okay, here are some ways that we can acknowledge this, even on the physical campus itself, as a reminder. So you go there now, they actually have new student apartments named in honor of Sojourner Truth. They have different markers across campus talking about Black contributions, the use of enslaved labor at certain points, et cetera, et cetera. Georgetown undertook a similar study, and it's now offered scholarships to descendants of slaves whom they sold to help fund the university. And to save it when it was in financial danger. I think Brown has undertaken certain similar things. So we may not go back that far, only 1910, but encouraging the university to take a really honest look at that history and then set very tangible goals for, okay, what do we want to do in response now that we know this, could be a good step to take.
Any other comments to that question? If we have more time, which we do because I control it, there was a question that came through, and it says, how can we work in the future to ensure that all members of the Black community, especially those who are women and or transgender, are heard, amplified, and voices are represented as it pertains to these types of conversations or other types of town halls? What can we do to bring a bigger focus to these groups within the Black community moving forward?
I would say just believing their stories. So when they tell you something's going on, Oh, you can't even see me. That's the lighting. Sorry. But I feel like recently when a lot of things like the mortality rate when giving birth for Black women is really like high in the baby because they don't get enough treatment, or transgender women getting beaten and killed, and a lot of it's not really known because it's not shared, or it's only known because of it's on video or something like that. And so it's just like believe them when they talk. I don't know if you or Summer have more experience. I'm from the outside looking in, but I know when my mom or my sister would say something to people, and when they use the microaggressions against them and stuff, like, it's really like they kind of shrug it off. It's like, yeah, that doesn't really happen. But seeing just people trying to respect you as a human, like these things actually happen, then stuff will get better. But that's just me. I don't know if any of you have something different.
Well, I think that like one of the reoccurring like terms that we are seeing is like protect Black women, protect trans women. Like we have to just protect each other, whether that's somebody you are attracted to, whether it be like women in general or trans women, you know what I mean? Uh, Again, it's like an allyship within itself. I guess we all can do, as in everybody can serve, an important role in doing so, as far as protecting women in general, as well as trans women, because not only are certain communities that are oppressed are under a certain amount of line of fire, but specifically now, like what Donovan was highlighting about mortality rate within Black women and senseless killings of trans women and people going missing, just being a strong advocate for that. A lot of it goes with like just certain gender roles, and women, from any background are just somewhat viewed as like incompetent, or like that their feelings, or just that they're not supposed to be heard. Everything that we as women say is just discredited. And I think men, as well as like everyone else from different backgrounds, whether it be of color or not, is just like giving a listening ear and just really advocating for people.
If I can add for a moment, and then we have a few minutes, if I could play with, to kind of go back to an original question that was asked, because I think there was some clarity that came through. When we're talking about amplifying voices, yes, it's important to make sure that we believe them, and we're saying, hey, let's make sure the stories are told and heard and such, and so on and so forth. But we are also making sure, just as it is with an ally, we're not consuming spaces that those people are supposed to be there. If you are recognizing that the space in which you are a part of and are consuming and regularly asked to be a part of, but then the other voices you're speaking to aren't there, then I feel like you're also doing a disservice to that community you're trying to uplift and amplify. So making sure we're recognizing and reflecting of the spaces that we consume and that we occupy, and we're saying, okay, well, I'm not seeing a lot of XYZ here. I don't see a lot of this voice actually physically in the space to share that story, not just believe it, but also tell it. We have to be careful, like Bryce was saying, the boundaries were set and created, making sure, okay, if that person can't be there, then they give me the permission to share as part of the narrative, but I don't want to speak on that narrative if it's not something that I should be sharing in this space. And I would like that person to come in and speak on it on their own behalf. So amplifying, uplifting, and saying, this person needs to be here and it's important because their stories matter. their experiences matter, and we need to believe them. So, right, support Black women, or support Black trans women, Black trans men. Those things should also be happening in the spaces, and they should physically be occupying the spaces rather than us saying it for them. Just as we are saying nobody should be taking the space of us, we all should be sharing that space and being an ally for others, if I can share that. So I know I'm playing with time, and I'm so sorry, people. If you do need to go, I want you to take it upon yourself to do that. But someone had shared some clarity. So it says to truly address racial inequality on campus, going back to the original question right before, the university must acknowledge its shortcomings, etc. For example, a well-known frat on campus consistently said racist things, and there have been no accountability measures to hold those community members accountable. And even recently, an entire student's bias incident report was released to a right-wing media site. If you truly want racial equality, what are some things the university can do to ensure those instances, like the ones that were listed, aren't so commonplace?
I think what they're talking about, I remember a few instances, and we all, get all riled up and stuff, talk to the president, people. And I think they didn't do anything because they said something about, the First Amendment right to say that there was that's what the basis of it was. And so what I really think was talking about, as I mentioned before, the money thing, if they're like parents or somebody or friends donate money to this school and they have to protect their image, they're not really going to go hard on the students who say these things, because there's a reputation and there's money involved, and they stop donating, then the school could collapse. And that's what I think. So I wouldn't know how to change that. I just think they should have some type of backbone and be holding people accountable.
I'll talk again. I'm not a part of the panel, and I apologize for consuming your space. Do you mind if I take some leeway, if you will?
Nope, not at all.
Not at all, they say. So to that, I feel like it's important to make those voices uncomfortable to be said, and those actions uncomfortable to be done. So I do some other types of education, and one of the things that I do is called Green Dot training. And if you haven't done the training, be sure it's coming to you. So sign up. But one of the things proactive things that you can be doing, consuming the spaces where you can say that kind of behavior is not tolerated here. BGSU is not a space and place that we will tolerate that type of rhetoric, that type of behavior, that type of whatever case may be. We want to ensure students of color feel protected here. Black, Indigenous people of color, faculty, staff, and otherwise should definitely feel like they belong. And one way to do that is make sure that the safety net is provided. So if you are saying to other people that actually that's not cool for XYZ fraternity, XYZ sorority should be saying, and then you constantly said it over and over and over again, that's holding them accountable. Not just the money aspect, but also the ways in which you're trying to say and create the space around it, so that they know the next time they do it, not just the actionable steps of reporting, et cetera, documenting, but also, hey, my own brother, I'm going to hold that person physically accountable. He is no longer a member here, or he is no longer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The same is true for a person who experiences harm. Racial harm happens on campus, and that person should feel and be able to say, I've experienced this, I've taken it to XYZ spaces, but where else can I go to feel safe? And every last one of us inside of this conversation should be able, I'm a safe space right here. I know that that's not tolerated. I've used my platform. I've said this, I've written in this space, and this place. All of that should be able to be done and proactively stated so that on a whole, BGSU looks like that doesn't happen here. That's not tolerated. And when you speak to it, people are like, nope, you're right. I won't tolerate it also. And Dr. Edge will say it in his classrooms, and Tony will say it in her spaces, and Will go on and say it in Summer, and so on and so forth. And that trickles into other spaces. So now you're consuming and muting the voices that are trying to say those ignorant comments and do those ignorant things that are happening to create an unsafe space. That's what I feel like needs to be happening. And maybe we haven't done that, but now we're in an age in which that can be done, and done so well that we now look like the campus that doesn't tolerate it, and other campuses have to look at us to say, oh, well, at least we know BGSU is a place that my student or that we can look to say, how are you doing it? Because it's happening here at XYZ. Does that make sense? I said a lot. Is that okay? Okay. Thank you all. So I got some thumbs up. Thanks. Does anybody else want to add? I do know we're over time, and I want to give some thanks and acknowledgments to different people. So does anybody else, if anybody else would like to add, I don't want to take that spot from you. All righty. Well, I really do want to thank our audience for coming and joining us tonight. Thank you so much for engaging, sending in your questions, saying the things in the comments, and sharing your experiences with us in the comments, and also for Bobby for just showing up. Also, I want to thank our panelists that are here today, and also the partnerships that we have here today. NPHC, On Par, Brave, BSU, and YDSA, Young Democratic Socialists of America. I want to say that they've taken a back seat. They wanted other voices to be amplified. They did not want to make this political. And so I really do want to thank them for creating this space and promoting this type of conversation to happen. Also, I want to thank Dr. Edge for coming in and sharing his expertise and knowledge on the areas, and also helping amplify other voices. Daryl, I kind of sort of forgot what you were a part of, and I want to apologize for that, but also share that we thank you for just coming in as not just as an alum, but also as an educator to say what you need to say, to also encourage other people to use their voices. So with that being said, if no one else has anything to add, I want to dismiss you all. Thank you again for coming.
All right, thank you. And thanks, Matt and YDSA. Appreciate you for having NPHC on here. Definitely is an honor to be on this panel today.
Thank you.